is ChatGPT the end of programmers and developers and software engineers? And are all of us going to be out of a job? Well, in today's video, I'm going to do my best to answer that. And we're going to discuss the pros and cons of ChatGPT and kind of go over what it is, the case for and against it. And also, I'm going to give you my opinion on it. And then we're going to end with asking ChatGPT, hey, are you going to take all of our jobs? So first off, what is ChatGPT? Well, an oversimplified answer is that it's an advanced chatbot that will kind of give you very confident answers and can kind of have a conversation with much more naturally than some of those very annoying chatbots that you get for like customer support on various websites. So much better than that. But let's actually get it from the horse's mouth. Is that an expression? I think so. Now that I say it out loud, it seems like a very weird expression. But let's ask ChatGPT, can you explain ChatGPT? What you're going to see is ChatGPT is a variant of GPT, Generative Pre-trained Transformer Language Model, that has been fine-tuned for the task of chatbot conversations like other human language models, yada, yada, yada. The responses are more relevant and appropriate for chatbot conversations with a human user. So it kind of generates a human-like conversation and it remembers context for that conversation. And it is like an advanced chatbot. So it is very cool, but let's kind of go into some pros and cons of it for kind of web developers and programmers more specifically. So first off, what is the case for ChatGPT? Well, it can write code quite quickly. And just to show you an example of this, I'm going to ask it to write a JavaScript function that takes 2 inputs and calculates the sum. Whoops. I put sun, but let's see if it actually kind of picks up what I've laid down here. I hope so. Could I just write sum asterisk and then it kind of gets that I'm not making any sense? I don't know. We'll see. Here's a simple JavaScript function that takes 2 inputs and returns a sum. So it kind of picked up what I was laying down there. And you can see it writes this function very quickly. It looks like a perfect little sum function. And then it even gives you an example of calling this function, creating a let variable declaration in JavaScript, and then console logging the result. So that is very cool. And it writes this code very quickly. So that is definitely one benefit. And then also ChatGPT does a really good job of kind of eliminating mental overhead. Like if I ask it to do a more complex function, it can write that function very quickly. And I don't really have to think about the logic behind it. So I'm going to say, write a JavaScript function that calculates the nth Fibonacci. So if you're not familiar, Fibonacci sequence is a sequence that programmers and developers are often asked about in like interviews, and it's kind of annoying, but it calculates these kind of Fibonacci numbers, and I definitely spelled Fibonacci wrong there, but we'll see how it does with this. As you can see, here's a JavaScript function that calculates the nth Fibonacci number, and then you can see it writing out the logic of this function here. And it even writes a recursive response to where it calls this Fibonacci function within it itself. So very, very cool here. Like, as you can see, if you didn't already know how this works, calculating the nth Fibonacci number might be kind of tricky, but this just reduces all mental overhead, and it even gives you some context and explains kind of what it's doing and gives you some examples here. So also that is very cool and can be beneficial and have its use case. And then another very good case for it is that it's very good at generating UI ideas. And Codex community here, maybe I'll pop up on the screen a clip of their video that they did in which they generated a bunch of like user interfaces with AI. And it was actually really cool. And
Everything from the color choices to how well balanced it is between the image and the text, and even these elements which are in the foreground and the background with the leaves just make it look like it stands out. It's almost a design aesthetic onto itself. Of course, if we look closely, we can recognize these texts. Well, they don't really mean anything, but we have all the common elements from this AI, where we've got a logo, a menu, a hero text, a tagline, buttons, what looks like a bit of a slider. This is where we're at right now with AI art, creating web designs that are just kind of mind-blowing.
I could totally see this giving a lot of kind of creative inspiration for different UIs and stuff like that. So that is also a case for it. But what are some cases against ChatGPT? Well, for one, you still need to know what questions to ask it. Like in my examples here, when I'm giving these prompts here, if I'm doing something more complex, like if I'm going to ask ChatGPT to write a JavaScript function using the fetch method that hits an API asynchronously, and then it loops over the responses to calculate the sum of the items in someone's cart. Like, you kind of still need to know how to program to even ask that question. And you also need to know how to program to know if that is actually a correct response here. As I've seen several examples online of people kind of playing with this and building apps with it, in which ChatGPT will give you a very confident response. And sometimes it's like not necessarily a wrong response, but considering the context of what you're trying to do, it's not the best response. And it could kind of lead someone that doesn't know how to code down a wrong path, in which they might have these kind of subtle bugs in their program that they don't really know are there just because they kind of took this very confident answer. So you still need to know what questions to ask. You still need to know if it's giving you correct code, and you need to understand the code. And if you don't understand the code, then you're just going to create this kind of like black box application that is going to be super fragile with ChatGPT, and you're not really going to know what's going on with it. And I think there was like a tweet or something like that. I don't have Twitter, so I heard this from another developer that said this, and we were talking about this, but it was along the lines of, before ChatGPT came out, you would spend 20% of your time writing the code and 80% debugging. But after ChatGPT, 1% of your time is writing code because ChatGPT writes it so fast. But then like 120% of your time is spent debugging, because you actually have to spend more time debugging because it kind of leads you down these wrong kind of code paths and stuff like that. So that is also a case against it. If you just use the responses, and similar from just using responses from Stack Overflow, if you don't understand your code, you're going to create this black box, fragile application that doesn't really work for a long-term scalable solution. And then also, some questions require a lot of context and trade-offs, and it kind of makes it difficult to just use one of ChatGPT's solutions. For example, in my professional day-to-day career, I'm solving business problems using code. And sometimes we're okay with certain trade-offs. Like, for example, sometimes we're okay with a slower running function because we can just display kind of a loader there, and it's kind of expected in that user interface. But sometimes having a slower function is critical, and we do not want that whatsoever. And within the architecture of our application, sometimes it might be better to like lazy load a component and improve the UI. And sometimes lazy loading those components might not actually be the best idea, depending on kind of the business use case. So in all these situations, understanding core programming principles of how to architecture an application for good performance, and what's going to be a scalable solution, and making your code extensible and kind of modular, and having a certain code style, all these things require a lot of context and trade-offs, and might not necessarily just come from a solution given to you by ChatGPT. So those are some cases for and against it. Now, what is kind of my overall opinion on this? Well, I think that more and more tools are going to be built for developers using AI and different things like ChatGPT to make a developer more powerful and solve problems faster. This could be things like GitHub Copilot, or I'm sure there's going to be more and more tools, as it seems like AI is kind of like on that exponential growth curve in which more and more things are coming out that are very useful. So I think that this is going to make a single developer much more powerful, probably reducing the need for as many developers. As if you think about it, let's say that there is 1,000 total units of work to be done for a certain company. And previously, a web developer could have done 100 units on his own. Well, that company might have needed 10 developers to get all those 1,000 units done. But if a developer is able to use these tools now and now get 500 units of work done, well, that company is going to be like, hey, we're not going to have 10 developers anymore. We're just going to have 2. And that potentially reduces the demand of developers. But with that said, I think AI and ChatGPT and all these different things will probably create a bunch of new jobs that are well suited for developers. As a developer's job or a programmer's job isn't to just write syntax for a language. A programmer's job is to write logic that solves problems. And I don't think the need for having individuals to use logic to solve problems is really going anywhere anytime soon. Now, is it potentially going to look a bit different? And is it actually going to be a developer that is writing code all day? Maybe not. Maybe it's going to be some AI tool or something like that. But I think that having a developer there that can systematize and write logic and solve these problems in a very scalable way and architecture an entire application is still going to be super useful and super important for the foreseeable future. So I don't think that AI is going to completely replace developers within the next several years. But I do think it will make a single dev more productive, potentially decreasing the need for people that just write code. But like I said, it's probably going to create more jobs. And I don't know what those are going to be, but I think that programmers and people with these skills could be very well suited for it. But before I kind of end this video, let's ask ChatGPT, are they going to take all of the developer jobs? So heading back here, will ChatGPT take the jobs of programmers? And let's see what it has to say for itself here. Language models like ChatGPT are very good at generating human-like text, but they're not capable of replacing programmers in most cases. While they can generate code that is syntactically correct, they do not have the ability to understand the purpose or functionality of the code. Programmers require a lot of high-level problem solving and logical reasoning skills, as well as the ability to design and implement complex systems. Language models are not able to perform these tasks currently. However, they are useful tools for programmers, and they can help with tasks such as code completion, generating documentation, suggestions, and different things like that. They can assist programmers, such as testing and debugging as well. In summary, while language models, this is crazy, by the way, right? Like ChatGPT may be able to assist programmers with certain tasks, they're not capable of fully replacing them. And I'm not gonna lie, I think ChatGPT heard what I was saying and just said it back to you. So that's pretty wild.